In the quiet suburban area of Santry in North Dublin, a family found themselves caught in a terrifying mystery. It began in the summer of 1995, a time that should have been full of sunshine and laughter, but for Sandra and her family it was anything but that. Her son, a little boy of just 3 years old, started speaking of strange happenings. He claimed to be taken away at night. At first Sandra dismissed it as a childish imagination, but the stories didn't stop. He spoke of a bold man who would come to him in the dark, a man who took him to a tent in the sky filled with lights. Sandra was angry, frustrated, and she scolded her son, telling him no more television and no more stories. But still, the stories continued, and her son became increasingly afraid of bedtime. It was a hot summer that year, and every morning Sandra awoke with a fuzzy head, as if she hadn't slept at all the previous night. One day, her son's nose began to bleed, again and again, and it wouldn't stop. The play school teacher said it must be the weather, but Sandra knew that it always seemed to happen after his stories had been taken away. She tried to brush it off, to ignore it, but then something else happened. She spoke to her neighbour, a mother who had her own young child, and heard an all too familiar story. Her neighbour's little boy, just 3 years old, had been having nightmares about a boogeyman who visited in the dead of the night, refusing to sleep without the light on. Sandra said nothing about her own son's stories, but the sense of dread deepened. The next occurrence came in September. It started with a flashback. As Sandra drifted off to sleep one night, she remembered her son waking in the night, scared, so she climbed into the bed beside him, and then, all of a sudden, a bright light flooded the room, piercing through the window. She awoke, sweating, with her heart racing, a terror she couldn't explain, gnawing at her soul. Her son spoke of other children he saw there, children crying for their mothers and fathers. He told her that sometimes Sandra, her husband, and even his little sister went too, but Sandra doesn't remember any of this. The next occurrence was with her husband. 3 nights in a row, he awoke from his sleep, shaking violently, mumbling about them at his leg. He wouldn't speak of it in the daylight, and even now he remained silent, refusing to talk about what he described as them. The next occurrence was with their baby girl, who was just 2 years old at the time. She began to scream whenever Sandra tried to lay her in her cot. The screams went on for over a week, and then one day, Sandra's son, calm as could be, came into the bedroom and told her that her sister was afraid of the bold man who came at night. The next occurrence was one Friday night as Sandra went to bed. She woke up terrified with another flashback, clawing its way out of the shadows of her mind. She was lying in bed, shaking, her heart hammering in her chest. She remembered someone was pulling a blanket over her head, gripping it tight. Sandra screamed, pleading with it to go away, begging for it to let her go. She described a figure standing by her bed, not very tall, but with thin arms and a surgical mask over its face. And then nothing, just darkness. Sandra cannot remember anything else. Sandra hasn't slept properly since that night. She lives in constant fear, wishing and praying that it is all just a bad nightmare, but deep down she knows it isn't. She says she's a good mother, she loves her children, her husband, but that something is happening to her family, something she can't explain. Sandra doesn't watch shows like The X-Files, but after her recent experiences, she found herself searching for UFO programs on television, hoping maybe to make sense of all of it. Sandra wants to be told that it's all in her head, that none of this is real, so that she can tuck her children into bed and sleep again without worry. But deep down she knows she is not the only one, and that there are other stories in the Santry area of similar experiences that have been reported. And so the question remains, what's happening to Sandra and her family? Is it all in their minds? Or could it be something else, something from beyond the stars? Stories of alien abductions often follow a pattern. Families across generations report similar experiences. Some believe that whatever is behind these strange visitations often return to the same bloodlines over and over, choosing them, perhaps for reasons we may never understand. Ultimately, there have been no follow-ups to this one contact with Sandra and her family. This case remains unexplained. Until next time, remember, the things that we fear in the dark may be closer than we think. Sleep well if you can.